My name is Mark, and in this podcast, we're going to be talking about the soul in Buddhism. So there's a really big question that often comes up in Buddhism is, does Buddhism believe in a soul? And this becomes a very interesting issue because it kind of depends on which particular viewpoint that you see Buddhism through. So currently, there are two views of Buddhism. One is a secular humanist view of Zen Buddhism and Buddhism in general, and one is more of the mystical religious view of Zen and Buddhism. So depending on which side of the aisle, so to speak, or which particular viewpoint that you want, you can kind of pick and choose, which is how it is currently. So what does the original Buddhism and the Buddha himself actually say about this issue? And we will go through that. What are the actual teachings of Buddhism, and then what has become of Buddhism are two different things. And I do have to kind of go through that. It's been very well documented that Buddhism today is quite different than Buddhism that maybe we have known historically. Such scholars as Dr. Ananda Kumsworthy, C.A.F. Reyes Davids, and many other researchers have all concluded that what passes as Buddhism today is not Buddhism. More specifically, Dr. Kumsworthy quoted saying that Buddhism is most admired for everything it is not. And I would have to agree 100% with these statements, that the Buddhism that is in book, that is currently being published in books and being talked about in the Buddhist churches and Zen Centers, probably is not the Buddhism that the Buddha taught, and is definitely would not align with the philosophy that Buddha is teaching. So when we start to ask, okay, so why do we have two different camps? What happened here? During the, I would say, in the 60s and 70s, when there was sort of a rejection of established religion, a lot of Westerners were seeking, Indian gurus and Japanese priests and trying to find something that was not Christian. So I call them the ABC Buddhist, anything but Christian Buddhist. And they sort of hooked into this Zen, that everything is mind, that everything is Zen. And that sort of kind of became a trend unto itself, and thus kind of created a secular humanist movement within the Buddhist and Zen schools, where that kind of view where, Buddhism does not teach a soul, or Buddhism says there's no soul, which it's definitely a pushback against maybe a Christian doctrine or a Jewish doctrine that they're rebelling against. So there's now what I would call a secular Buddhism. It could also be called social Buddhism or millennial Zen, another word for it. This is in this secular humanist Zen and Buddhism viewpoint, which is very popular, and you'll find a lot of the current Western Zen centers will hold this to be their beliefs, that there is no soul, and there's no God, there's no gods or God or supreme being or divine intelligence, and there's no heaven, there's no nirvana, there's no Western paradise. So they utterly deny that those things exist, or those things are there, or that they just deny those teachings. The another point is that in secular Zen, they practice to make the world around them a utopia. They actually have this thought that their practice can make phenomena eternal. The rising and falling, the born and decay of things, they can make eternal. They can stop the suffering of the phenomena itself. And they see that their practice, what they call practice at this point, becomes following moral codes, rule following, and conforming to the Sangha. And at this point, the Sangha is kind of more than becomes the authority. That they are saying, well, my teacher said this, so therefore I do. They're conforming to the Sangha, which would be could be groupthink, could be what is popular, could also just be whoever they choose to be their leaders, and that is that. So this is almost directly opposite of what actual Buddhism and Zen actually is. What I would call religious Buddhism or religious Zen believes in a soul. They believe in the absolute, which the Christians call God. They believe in a nirvana, which would be the liberation of the soul. The practice of religious Zen and Buddhism is more of a methodology to liberate the soul from suffering, liberating the soul from this phenomenal manifest existence of suffering. And they believe in natural law, which would be wisdom, rather than a codex of rules and morals and leadership telling them what to do. So these are the two striking differences between the kind of Buddhism and Zen that currently exist in the West. And I know this sounds absolutely crazy to be hearing these things, and it's only the reason I have to bring this up, and especially in my second podcast, is because this issue of the soul in Buddhism is so critical that the entire path of Buddhism, the Buddhism itself lives and dies on this entire one issue. And your entire, what you would call your Zen practice or your Buddhist adventures in spirituality can greatly be shaped just on this one single issue. So the no soul camp likes to always go back to the Nikayas, and they always go back to the Pali or the Sanskrit term anatta. That would be the Pali term for not soul, or anatman, which is a Sanskrit term for not soul. And this is in Buddhist doctrine, where in the Nikayas, the Buddha giving his discourses to his monks would go through and tell them what is not the soul. And so he would point out, he would say, the self is not the soul. And that often is poorly and inaccurately translated as you do not have a soul, that there is no soul. And this is a completely, absolutely erroneous translation of this. However, if you already predispositioned that there is no soul and that only phenomena exist, then you're gonna agree with this statement. But like I said, if you do, then pretty much all of Buddhism falls at that point, and everything that the Buddha says thereafter becomes meaningless. So in the Buddhist canon, the word atta means soul, and atman means soul in Sanskrit. And that particular term is used quite a bit in the soul, the atta. And the prefix an, which is an, and then atta, A-T-T-A, or an, and then atman, A-T-M-A-N, means not soul. It's an adjective, not a not a noun. This term does not mean no soul. It means not soul, such as this self, which in Buddhism we call it the skandhas. And the skandhas are 5 things that we call myself, which would be form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. And this is what we called myself. But what Buddha is saying is anatta, which is the soul is not that self. The soul is something, I would say, that illuminates my form, sensation, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness that I think is myself. And sometimes that's in Zen, they might call that the false self. But then in Zen, they also say there's the true self, which is the illuminator of all these things. And that is what in Buddhism we call atta, the soul. So when the Buddha is speaking about anatta, it's always within the 5 aggregates that this is not your soul. Form is not your soul. Sensation is not your soul. Perception is not your soul. Mental formations is not your soul. And consciousness is not your soul. Okay, because we're talking about, when we talk about the soul, we're talking about something that cannot be seen or measured, cannot be held, cannot be painted, cannot be taken a picture of. So whenever we talk about something that cannot be measured or seen or held or tasted or known with our senses, we always have to talk about it in what it is not. And that is known as the via negativa methodology of philosophy. And you will see that time and time again in the Buddhist doctrine of this use of talking about a soul or a spirit as in what it is not. And sometimes this via negativa for the untrained or the uninitiated into this particular methodology of philosophy can definitely look like it's nihilism, or it's saying that the soul does not exist, or that there is that. That's kind of the mistake that often happens with this. The issue of the Atman. So in the Nikayas itself, because a lot of people say, well, show me proof. I need to see hardcore proof that what you're saying is so. And we go back again to the Nikayas, and there's 5 Nikayas, which have been proven to be a pre-existent documents before the Theravadins, Tripitaka. And there is no negation of atta. In Buddhism, there are 626 occurrences of this word in the Buddhist canon, and never once is it saying no soul. It's only saying what is not the soul, that the skandhas are not the soul, that phenomena is not the soul. Okay, this is what it is saying. So famous researchers such as Dr. Ananda Comsworthy and C.A.F. Rice Davis have all researched this out. They were talking about going to the 20s and 30s, all the way to the 40s, when a lot of this was being first researched. And realized, coming out, and they even said that an Atman is not a negation of the soul. Rather, it's an adjective to say as what the soul is not, in the via negativa methodology. And those who don't understand this methodology make conclusions and opinions about Buddhism that are just not so. Even the researchers have come out and said that this current no soul nihilism has always been completely a spurious notion, and it's just not so. So the proof is there that the Buddhist doctrine does talk about a soul, and it's called atta, and it's not, the soul is not describable. And we cannot know the soul. I can't tell you what my soul looks like or what it is, but I could tell you that you do have a soul, and I can tell you how to know you have one. And the reason that you know you have a soul is because of suffering. Suffering is the first noble truth of the Buddha. The Buddha, one of his, the first sermon was, or the first platform that Siddhartha Gautama came out, who we call the Buddha in a reverence term, said the noble truth of suffering, and that, basically that it's not a physical suffering, but it's more of a mental suffering, a want. It's a clingings or sufferings. Wanting is suffering. So it's more of a want of the spirit, a want of the self. And when we're talking about the self, it's the self of the skandhas. And it can be more of an existential want. We know we have a soul because of suffering. Now think about it like this. The soul is unborn, undying. It is immortal. It is always there. Think of it like an immortal light. And then think of phenomena as it rises, it falls. It grows, it dies. It is young and is old. So phenomena is always in decay. And in between that, you have the permanent, and then you have the decay, and then you have what's in between. And in between is what we call, the mind, Sita, which is the observer of this. And this is where suffering is known. And as a counterpoint to the no soul people, is that if you did not have a soul, then suffering would be unknown. There would be no such thing. We would have physical discomforts, but they would be immediately forgotten about the moment that the discomfort was gone. There would be no longings. There would be no cravings. There would be no spiritual desires, or existential desires. Having said that, if there was no soul, then there would be no Buddhism. There would be no need for the teachings. These teachings would never have existed. The very fact that we do have these things, and the very fact that it's not something that just one person had. You see this kind of, talking about suffering all throughout the religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism. You see it in the shamanic religions. Everybody has this particular point of suffering. And so we know we have a soul. And that is one of the first things that Buddhism kind of talks about, is the soul. So it becomes almost impossible to deny that you have a soul with Buddhism. Once you realize that the soul does exist, the entire secular humanist Zen and Buddhism position on this completely dissolves into just, it becomes a phenomenal. You see them as, they're trying to make phenomena nirvana. They're trying to make what is by nature rising and falling permanent. And if you really want a definition of complete insanity, well, that's it. A lot of times in Buddhism, the sutras will talk about this body being the soul chariot. You will also hear the term soul chariot in Greek philosophy. This is a very important keynote into the two, where you see Greek philosophy starting to emerge in the Buddha Sutras. So if you clearly come to the position that you do have a soul, and that you actually believe you have a soul, that the soul is eternal, the soul is the illuminator of your skandhas, that the soul cannot be measured and cannot be seen. I mean, with you you have it because of the suffering, but you can't sit there and you can't you can't measure it, you can't see it, you can't put it in a box, you can't move it, but it's there. So if you truly believe that, and you have faith that what the Buddha is teaching, that we can actually come to know our soul, and come to see the suffering that we hold in our sita, or that it causes, and that we. So it's so then that we know of suffering, we know of the cause of suffering, which is the holding of the cravings and the flourishings. That the Buddha teaches that there is a cessation of suffering, that it can be ended. This is the big part of faith. Can we end suffering? Can suffering be ceased? And this is a faith part. And then there's the part of the path leading to the end of suffering. So this is actually, I'm talking about the Four Noble Truths here. And I'll say them again. It's the noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of the cause of suffering, the noble truth of the end of sufferings, and the noble truth of the path leading, the path to ending of sufferings. And this is so critical, because the noble truths all work. It all depends on your belief of a soul. If you say there's no soul, then this is utterly meaningless, because we're talking about a path of ending soul suffering and the disembodiment. That's a Buddhist word for liberation of the soul from the phenomenal body. And if you can't even be called a Buddhist, or even be called a Zen student, and without a fundamental belief in this and the faith in what Buddha is teaching. And I know this sounds very hardcore, and it sounds, people are saying, well, you're telling me what to think. And no, I'm not telling anybody what to think or what to believe. I'm just saying that this is the fact of what Buddhism is. It'd be very much the same as, if I wanted to be a Tibetan follower, and if I don't believe in the Dakinis and all the gods and all the wheel of life and the heavens and hell realms, then I would have a hard time following any of that, or even believing the magic of the pujas. And the same thing with any of the shamanic religions, if you do not believe in those things. So Buddhism, the path that Buddhism sets forward, is on these beliefs. So a lot of people, I can hear the people saying, well, heck, I don't believe I have a soul, or I don't believe there is a soul. I don't believe such a thing exists. These are the same ones that will also turn around and say things like, well, enlightenment doesn't exist, and nobody can be enlightened, and nobody can become a Buddha. There are no bodhisattvas, there are no arhats, and there's no liberation, there's no nirvana, and there's no eternity. The only thing that they will say is that there's phenomena, and that's all there is. And that is what I call crypto-nihilism. It's a difficult point with people. People who are caught in crypto-nihilism are very difficult to work with. They just simply stamp their feet and declare that they are right because they can pound the rock on the ground, and they can point to the colors of the sky, and they can feel the wind, and they can say that this is my God. And there's just nothing you can do with that kind of thing. And when that kind of mentality pushes itself into Buddhism and declares itself as Buddhism, you have just let the what is it? I guess in Christianity they'll call that the Antichrist. I guess in Buddhism they would call that the anti-Buddhist. The anti-Buddha is now in your church. The anti-Buddha has entered the door and is now masquerading as the teachings of the Buddha. And actually the Buddha had even talked about this, when false teachings will arise and spurious notions, false notions arise up. This is something that even in his days, people would go off and teach and kind of saying, well, the soul is your skin, the soul is your eyes. I'm looking, you can see the soul through your eyes kind of talk. And this is something that happens in Buddhism, and currently in the 2020. This is very much rampant in the Zen Centers, this sort of no soul belief that the phenomenal world is nirvana kind of discussions. And you just shake your head in realizing that not one single person in the entire Zen Center is a Zen student, and far less a student of Buddhism. Let's go ahead and I don't want to get too far into the noble truths. I'll leave that for another video. And there's a whole nother video or a whole nother podcast we can do for the Eightfold Path, which gets into the process of freeing your soul from the capture of phenomenal existence, which is the true self that they call in Zen. Buddhism, it becomes a very difficult point. Now, I studied Zen back in the 80s, and pretty much by about 2003, I retired and basically stepped back from Zen for about 20 years, 19 years. And even back in the 80s, there was telltale signs of the secular Buddhism was on the rising. I remember it being called, it was like Zen in action, or social Zen, but it was more of an idea with much younger Zen and Buddhist students that Zen should be, it was called engaged Buddhism. That's what it was called. And it was much more this idea that Buddhism should be engaged in the world to try to make the world a better place for human beings. And this was done through the promotion of peace and harmony, vegetarianism, and living a clean life, no smoking, no drinking kind of ideals. And this is really thought, well, if we can get everybody to start doing like this, then the world will be a better place. But that's not anything that the Buddha taught. The Buddha didn't go out and say, make everybody conform to my rules. Had he said that, it would be in the doctrine, in the Buddhist canon, and there's nothing like that in the Buddhist canon. Even though Buddhism is an evangelical religion, which is another thing that the secular humanists deny. Like to say that they go, Zen is not evangelical. Well, no, it is. And Buddhism is extremely evangelical. There is this secular view rose back in the, I would say about 1990s, all the way into the about 2000, I would say about 2000 was when more of the Zen centers were picking up this secular humanist version of Zen and starting to back off on the soul purification aspect of Zen. So, just speaking about Zen real quick here, and my first video, I kind of mentioned that Zen is a methodology. And so it's a methodology of what? It's a methodology of that second item on the Four Noble Truths, which is the cause of suffering, in which you suffer. And that kind of gets you to the door of the church. Everybody has this existential suffering, whether they know it or not. But when you know the suffering, when you feel it, when you know you're going to die, when you know that this self, the self on the skandhas, that we call you and me, when we really see that that's going to die, there becomes a panic, an existential panic. And that's what brings you to the church. That's what brings you knocking on the church doors. That's what's bringing you to wanting to talk to a priest about this. Hey, I got this concern that this body is already showing signs of age and weakness and some sicknesses here, and I'm starting to realize that I'm not going to be around much longer. So there's some questions, there's some concerns about that issue. The next step is to bring you to realize what this is, what the self really is, and then what the true self really is. The true self is immortal because you always are immortal. But this is not something that that the Buddhists can say, just believe this because I said it. And even the Buddha said, come and see. Don't believe it because somebody told you. So the methodology in Zen is the most expedient means to bring you to see that self, that self that is sitting on top of your skandhas. And when you see that self, when you observe that self suffering, and you literally turn internally, in a spiritual sense, you turn backwards and you look at what is illuminating that self, what brings that self to your notice, to the existence. You see the soul, you see the absolute, and that is the enlightenment. And enlightenment is almost it's almost a precursor. It's almost a preliminary to even begin the Eightfold Path. Until that enlightenment happens, the Eightfold Path, you could learn it. You can put it into your memory, and you can start putting the wheels in motion. But it's not really ready yet. The Buddha's Eightfold Path of Liberation is what it should be called. And so enlightenment in Zen, and the Zen methodology, is the quickest and most expedient means to it. So how long should it take? Well, the Buddha claimed that people who would come to him for the holy teachings, they would awaken within days, if not weeks. And in Zen Centers, or in Zen, it's pretty much the same thing. Students would come and awaken pretty quickly to their true nature, what's real, and then you can start the real work, the part of soul purification and disembodiment. That is Buddhism in a nutshell. It's an ontology of liberation on wisdom. And anybody who says anything different doesn't even know what Zen and Buddhism is. They're just children playing in men's clothing, if they say it's something else. And unfortunately, you see a lot of that. And that's what a lot of my videos and podcasts are out there to do, is to correct some of these wrong notions and hopefully to revive what the true teachings are. And I know that is a real challenging thing to say, is that these are the true teachings, because that's implying then that all these other people have wrong teachings. And that's kind of saying that I know and they don't. And unfortunately, I've come to the position that I know it sounds egotistical. I know it sounds I'm setting myself apart, and I know it's something that I never wanted to say, but it's something that has come to be, which is I am right. And I know what I'm saying is true. And I never wanted to be in this position in the first place. It's not something that I set out to do. I never set out to study Buddhism to realize that everything that I was taught for, 15 years was complete trash. There were some nuggets in there, and I believe that my first teachers did know, or at least they had a strong clue of what was going on there. But I believe that the pressures of the Sangha that they were trying to attend had other ideas. And sometimes that happens too. When your Zen center becomes a business plan, when your Buddhist church is a business plan, and you're there to serve the paying customers, what do you do when the customers want something different on the menu? Yeah, that becomes a real interesting question. And I know a lot of teachers struggle with that. I've talked to teachers who struggled with the fact that The students are rebelling against the Buddhist teachings because they want something different. What do? You serve them social Buddhism, millennial Zen, secular Buddhism, because it pays the bills. The Zen Centers have mortgages. They got to pay the utilities. The teachers have to eat. Healthcare. It's all there. It's a business, and I get it. And I believe that is as much of the problem these days. I mean, who's going to come to a Zen center where I'm going to, the teacher's going to say, okay, I know that you guys have read some Zen books and you came here all inspired to learn Zen because you read some Zen books, but I'm going to tell you that everything you learned is wrong and probably exactly backwards of what Zen really is. And I'm going to be telling you some things that you probably don't want to hear or know or do, because the path of enlightenment can be difficult. It can be extremely challenging. For some, that can be years of challenge, and it can be brutal. For others, it's easy. But then there's the whole part of soul liberation, cleansing of the soul, and that can be very difficult, very brutal, very challenging. And who wants that? Who said, oh my God, I just wanted to be calm and have a blissed out life and, try to put a little bit of, focus in my life. I wasn't here for all of this religious stuff. That's what the Zen teachers are hearing. And they're going, well, we do this and people are going to run away, and who's going to pay the bills? So this becomes a question. And I get it. Not everybody is ready to go down the path of Zen. Zen sounds cool. It's all mystical, and it's all kind of this, oh man, that's Zen. I really want to get some of that Zen. I'll be all calm, blissed out. Nothing will faze me. And I'll be like Mr. Spock, no emotions, all logical. And that is a completely, TV Hollywood version of Zen. Or they think Zen is like, Kung Fu, that, oh, I'm going to go hang out with Master Po, and and he's going to tell me wise things and stories, and we're going to have cool adventures. That ain't going to happen. So this becomes a very interesting issue where what do the churches do now when the people that they're coming to are not really ready for the teachings? So there's what I call Pure Land Buddhism, which is sort of an intermediate. In Pure Land Buddhism, you chant the name of Amida Buddha, and hopefully, you're kind of building a line to a determined rebirth. I call it this soul magic. And yes, Pure Land absolutely believes in the soul. If you go in there and tell the Pure Land priest and people that there's no soul, they're going to laugh at you and show you the door. So what do you do in Zen? So you kind of do have an aspirational part of Zen where it's like, look, we'll be aspirational towards the liberation of the mind. We'll be aspirational towards the awakened mind, which is enlightenment. Even though this may not be something that you're ready for or can do at this moment, but maybe you can do it later. So you have services. You have the Buddha service. You have meditations, and what are it's a meditation, and I would say it's more to feel that you're doing something at that point. So, and yes, people do make breakthroughs, because those that are ready, they're going to awaken no matter what. It doesn't really matter how it comes, they will awaken. However, it helps when the person awakens in a controlled environment, one where there's already a metaphysical philosophy in place, and one where that awakened mind can be guided onto the path, the Eightfold Path. Because what do you do? And this has been a question that I've talked to Zen teachers about. What do you do when a person comes to you already awakened, but they don't really have a metaphysical language to speak it in? And they just start, what ends up happening is they just start throwing everything up in the air, trying to explain or trying to talk to you and because they are an awakened mind, but they don't have a language to talk to you in, so it's everything. Oh, it's my kundalini, it's this, it's that, and it just becomes a blizzard of words with them. And sometimes the people mistake them as crazy people. Oh, that person's crazy. Boy, look at the way that person was talking and trying to express themselves. And the truth is that that's an awakened mind, but it has no frame of reference to talk to anybody in. So when you have in a religious environment, you hope to, cultivate minds to awaken, and then you put them on the path of the Eightfold Path. And this is what we hope to do. This is the point of the Zen Church. At least that's what I hope it's about. I know that it's people will be listening to this, and they're going to say, yeah, that's not happening. Or if it does happen, it's very not talked about. What do you do with the student, though, that is awakened? And this becomes another issue, because many of the Zen teachers are not awakened. And that's something that is another challenge. Even the Zen teachers themselves know that they're not awakened. They will say, look, they will admit that they don't believe in this. They don't believe in enlightenment. They don't believe in the Buddhist path. They don't believe in the Eightfold, the teachings of the Eightfold Path. They just don't believe it. They have a clue of what the methodology is about, but they don't really put it into action because they don't believe it works. And thus they kind of use Zen as the whole Zen church and their teachings pretty much just become I would say, low-level psychotherapy. How to live a life in this phenomenal world that doesn't really hurt anybody. Maybe, they'll try to teach you clean living and hey, don't smoke, don't drink, don't do bad things, and follow the authorities and do what you're told, and you'll stay out of trouble and have a good life. That's kind of how they see it. And it's like, yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll worship the Buddha, which the Buddha statues on the altar are it's an aspiration of the awakened mind. It's not of an actual person. There's no God there. It's we're devoting ourselves to the awakened mind. And maybe it's resigned that, well, maybe in this lifetime or this existence or at this point in time, I'm not going to do that, or I can't do that, or I don't know how to do that, but it's hopefully that it'll happen, maybe in the future, maybe in this lifetime down the road, or maybe in the next lifetime. One hopes to plant the seeds, so to speak. So this is what we have come to in our state of Buddhism, and I really don't think it's, actually now that I think about it, I don't really think that it's just this time, because when I read some of the writings of who I call the Zen oldies, those are those guys in about 850 AD China, they were kind of talking about the same things, in which the temples were teaching other things than Buddhism or other things than Zen, and there was a lot of criticism, even back then, of the decadence and the corruption within the system. Every age, every time has its own issues, and in this particular age, I believe it's secular humanism, and it may have come before, where people believe themselves are gods. And they believe that they are the gods. That this phenomena it's all there is. Again, it's crypto-nihilism. And even the Buddha talked a lot about the nihilist. Though those nihilists. So it's something that comes up from time to time. And it's something that we as, a religious Buddhist, we have to really take these things into deep consideration as into what it is. What do you do? What do you do if you say, well, look, I do believe there's a soul, and I do believe that I have one, and I do believe in everything that the Buddha is teaching, so what do I do? I mean, then you push hard for enlightenment. That is what you do. And then once enlightenment is, achieve enlightenment, people go, oh, there's no enlightenment. Well, it's not something that you go get because you don't have. It's something that you awaken to because it's already there. So I would say then you're when you basically awaken your mind, you wake up from the slumber that you're in. It is almost, you know what to do. Now it's the Eightfold Path. Well, okay, we've learned this Eightfold Path. Now you see the purpose of it. It's like we're going to learn something that you're not quite sure why, and you think it means something else. But then when you awaken, now you understand what it really means, and you put that into action. That's where that goes. And that's what I say you should do. And you should strive very hard for that. Because what is more important than that? What else do you have to do that's any better? Because if you could find anything better to do than the path of Buddha, go do it. When you're done with that, come back. That's what I had to do for a while. I had to go do something else. No shame in that. I spent 20 years doing something else. No shame in that. If you are not ready for the path, know that you're not ready. Say, look, I'm not ready. I don't mind learning this. I think it's good knowledge, and maybe 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, you'll be ready, and everything that you learned now will come back into play, and you'll realize, oh my gosh, not only can you do this, but maybe you have done it. Sometimes waking up you don't do waking up in a Zen center or into a temple. You don't go to a temple to wake up. Waking up can happen anywhere. You could be, you can say, I left all that 5-6 years ago. Bang! Wake up. Something happens. And it wakes you up to what's going on. Wakes you up to yourself. Wakes you up to understanding what is the nature of this. And everything that you've heard comes into play. If you're at a Zen center, let's say you're reading books. A lot of people study Zen just by reading books. They don't go to Zen centers. They don't go to temples. They never have any interaction with a so-called Zen master. And I'll tell you right now, there's no such thing as a Zen master. There's just people out there like me that hopefully encourage you to think about this path, to encourage you to learn about it, to encourage you to try. That's all there is. There's no such thing as a Zen master. People, if you're in the no soul camp, I don't know what to do. I could keep talking to you, I guess. Hopefully, maybe there's something I'll say or something that I'll mention that will get you to reconsider. I know that it's a hard road when you're that the whole social Buddhism, the secular Buddhism, and that looks real attractive because you really feel that you're doing something. But then something's going to happen where all that's just going to look so, you'll see it for what it is. It's just more delusion, more phenomena. And when that day comes, come back. I'm here for you. All right, so I guess we're about done on this particular subject of no soul, the soul in Buddhism. I know that I'm not giving out, Nikaya quotes and stuff like that, because it's kind of pointless to do such a thing. I mean, I have documents here that I can go through and chapter and verse, citing line and by line, but it's not worth it, because if a person fundamentally believes there's no soul, there's nothing I can do until that person belief in that position is proven untrue to themselves. And when they realize that position is false, then a discussion can happen. But nothing can happen until then. And for those of you that believe that there is a soul, there is no point in me trying to prove there's a soul, because that's not what we're here for. We're here to figure out what's next. Where are we going with this? All right. So this is pretty much going to be the end of my podcast on this issue. I thank you for listening. If you have questions or comments, feel free to make them. My website is thepathofzen.info, and you could find my contact information there. Of course, any donations or financial help that you would like to make would be greatly appreciated. All of that would go towards the website operation, and hopefully other kinds of Buddhist ministries I can get into. All right, thank you very much.